Hi there, this is Martin Brennand, Product Manager for Imagineer Systems, and today I'd like to show you our latest product, the Mocha Pro 5 plugin for Adobe. This plugin enables users to access the full Mocha Pro feature set inside After Effects and Premiere, and thus also interact with other third-party plugins. Now, this integration is incredibly useful for a number of reasons, and one of those reasons is tracking and modifying 360 VR footage along with the help of Mettle Skybox. The Mettle Skybox tools provide extensive VR workflow inside After Effects, and we can use this to set up VR shots for using various modules inside the Mocha Pro plugin. So let's take a look. Okay, so here we are inside After Effects, and we've got some footage here from the Swinburne University of Technology. So this is a stitched equirectangular view here of a guy skating around the university doing a bit of a tour. And obviously he's wearing a VR camera. So what we want to do here is add some footage into this shot by tracking the Swinburne logo over here and replacing it with a bit of trailer footage. Now, if we wanted to track this with Mocha, we're going to hit a few problems because there's a lot of warping going on here and it's not particularly planar. It's a bit hard to track this easily using the Mocha Planar Tracker without doing some severe warping. So what we can do instead is come up to Effect, and let's choose our layer first, obviously. And we'll come up to our Effect and choose Metal, and come down to this Mettle Skybox Converter. So the Mettle Skybox Converter is really useful for taking an input like this equirectangular image and changing it to something else. And we've got a few feeds in here. We've got a 2D source, a cube map, a sphere map, and so on. And we've got our output, which has the same. So in this instance, what I want to do is take my equirectangular image, which is this one, and change the output to a cube map. And what this will do is flatten it out like a box. So we can now go ahead and do a bit of manipulation in here to set it up for the Mocha Pro plugin. So let's just zoom in a little bit here so we can see what we're doing. Now you can notice I'm in quarter view here. We can come back up to full just to see a little bit clearer there. So what we want to do now is if I scrub through this timeline, you're still going to see this little problem here. We'll turn off adaptive resolution here for a second so we can see this a bit easier. But you'll see that the Swinburne logo here is actually crossing over the seam here of these boxes. And so that's also going to be a little bit difficult for the Mocha Pro plugin to track because it's splitting the plane in two. So what we want to do is use a bit of this tool here called Reorient Camera View to change and animate the position of this logo to stay about in one box section. And I'll show you how that's done. So I'm going to come back here and scrub back through and look for where this logo begins. And we can see that it's sort of coming to about here. It's still pretty good. And then it starts to bend over the area. And I want to track this whole wall area because we've got some nice texture detail to use here. So we're going to sit about here. And I'm going to come up and add a keyframe to the pan section here, the pan Y. So the reason I'm setting it here is that I want to set a 0 point here so that I can come back to it later. So the next thing I'm going to do is scrub through the timeline and see how far along that logo moves into the other box section. And we can see it stays kind of in this square. If we zoom out a little bit, you'll see it stays kind of in this square for a long time. So I'm going to come back to about frame 30 and I'm going to scrub the pan Y to move that Swinburne logo back into the main square in the middle here. So the reason I'm doing this is now that when I scrub backwards in the timeline, I'm just going to press U on the keyboard to see those two keyframes. When I scrub backwards in the timeline, what you're going to see is the camera view orientating to stay permanently in that middle square. So now I can go ahead and add the Mocha Pro plugin to track this logo accurately within this VR view. So to apply the Mocha Pro plugin, I'm actually going to pre-comp this layer so that the effect is contained inside. So I'm going to do my Command-Shift-C or Control-Shift-C if you're on the Windows, and I'm going to move all the attributes into the new composition, and we're going to call this one Insert Cube Map. And so this lets me know that I'm using the cube map for the skybox here. So I'm going to click OK. And so we've got our pre-comp there now. And what I'm going to do next is apply the effect by going down to Mocha by Imagineer Systems and choosing Mocha Pro. So here we have the Mocha Pro plugin for Adobe, and there's a lot of options in here for the After Effects version. Now, at the time of recording, this is the beta version, so there's a few changes you'll see in this interface in the final version, but this is mostly the full feature set that you're going to see. Now, there are a lot of things we could go into here for the actual plugin features, but the first thing we want to do is actually take our source footage of this comp into the Mocha Pro plugin. So what I'm going to do is come up here to Launch Mocha Pro and just click here. And this brings in our cube map directly from that effect comp into Mocha Pro. So immediately you can see an advantage here. We're now reading in the comp data directly from the After Effects timeline. There's no need to render anything out and import it into a standalone application. You can just use the source directly in your layers. This also, of course, means that if you're working in a proxy resolution, it will read directly into Mocha Pro, and then you can update to full later. Let's start working on our track. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit so we can see our logo a bit better, and I'm going to draw a shape around the wall here. So we're going to come up to our X-Spline tool. We're going to come in here and track the wall here. I'm only going to grab just the Swinburne texture area just there. And we want to probably cover the whole wall here. So I'm going to go into my surface here and draw my surface by using the corners here. I'm going to put them into the corners of this wall where I want my little new trailer to be, like so. And we can see how that's looking like that. Okay. And we can check the grid here to make sure that's lining up correctly. So once we've got our shape set up, and we've got that here, we can set on perspective because this wall moves in perspective, and we can set the minimum percentage of pixels to about 90. And so now we can go ahead and start tracking. So what you're going to notice here is that it's still going to turn around, but we've got a nice flat surface because it's on that cube map from the Mettle Skybox. And also when it comes over here, it's going to start animating back the other way because we've still got that animated keyframe from the Mettle Skybox converter. So we're able to keep tracking a nice straight piece of planar data with that effect feeding directly through the comp into the Mocha Pro plugin. So you can see the advantage here of being able to feed in third-party plugin data directly as a source into the Mocha Pro interface. So once we've done our track, and we're pretty happy with that, what we can do now is go ahead and do our insert. So I can go off here and just turn off my mat here, and we'll come down to the insert clip section. Now we've got our usual predefined inserts here, and we can also obviously import them. But another advantage is we can use the insert layer, and this is a new feature inside the Mocha Pro plugin, which means that you can take layer data from inside After Effects or Premiere and feed it directly into Mocha to render back into the timeline. So now that I've set this insert clip up, I'm going to go back into the After Effects timeline and use this to render an insert from there. So let's just close it up and save. And now we're back into the After Effects timeline. So what I can do now is I'm going to go back to my project bin and I'm going to come and drag in this trailer into our background. And I'm going to turn off the visibility of this. And I'm just going to cycle this up a little bit so we've got a nice frame to use. And then let's go back to our insert cube map. So under the module renders section of the Mocha Pro plugin, we have the option to choose an insert layer. So I'm going to choose my trailer here to add to the scene, and I'm going to check the render button. So by default, we're using the insert composite, and you can see already that our insert is being rendered here. So let's just find a frame here that we can make look pretty inside the interface here. So we'll come through. So there's a nice little explosion going on there. So that'll be a nice point to start with. So we've got a few options inside our render. We've got insert render composite, insert cutout, which actually makes the alpha of that actual insert so we can comp it down onto other shots. And then we've got all the other modules, so remove, stabilize, and the lens distortion. But for the insert, let's just cut out the composite there. We can also go ahead and view the mat that we made for that. and apply it as well. So if we want to matte out things and roto, we can do that directly inside the interface as well. And the advantage of this is that if we've got multiple layers, we can choose whether we choose all visible or all the matte. So I can come up here to my choose layers button and choose my various layers. Now in this example, we've only got one layer, so we can turn that on or off depending on what we need. So now that we've used the Mocha Pro plugin to apply the insert into our cube map, we want to get back to the standard equirectangular mode. So what we want to do now is reverse exactly what we did before and apply a new skybox converter to take the cube map back to equirectangular. So to do this, what we can do is actually copy the original effect we made to create the cube map in the first place. So I'm going to go inside my insert cube map, and here we have the Mettle Skybox converter effect we applied to the original source, where we generated those two keyframes to make sure that our area here was centered in the middle of the cube map. So I'm just going to copy that effect and go back over to my Swinburne VR insert. And importantly, I'm going to go back to frame 16, where we generated that original first keyframe, and I'm just going to paste that skybox effect in. Now, by default, it is going to do equirectangular to cube map because we did that originally, so we just need to switch that around to now become equirectangular. Now, one more thing you have to do is now reverse those keyframes. Now, if we go into here and we look at the effect, we can see those keyframes under the reorient camera view down here. Now, one way you could do this would be to actually go over here to frame 30 and invert this value of -103 to 103, and then switch those two values over. But an easier method is actually something that Mettle have put directly inside the plugin, which is just this simple command called Invert Rotation. And that's going to immediately flip the keyframes around so that it sets the right way. So Mettle have already designed this to be able to quickly switch between the cube map back to equirectangular and so on. It just makes it an easy workflow to copy and paste that effect and then re-invert back to your original state. So now when we drag through the timeline, you'll see that the insert is matching the original source. And we can check that by actually copying it. So I'm going to come back to my original source footage here. Let's just copy that and paste it over here. And I'm going to delete this extra skybox converter so we can see that properly. So here's our original footage. And if we turn it off, we can see now that we've got our insert matching in the view. So that's using the Mocha Pro plugin to render the insert into the cube map, and then the Mettle Skybox converter is taking the cube map and converting it back to the equirectangular view. So with that workflow in mind, let's take a look at another example. I'm going to come over to this one called Swinburne VR Remove. So in this version, what we've got is the same kind of thing. Let's just drag through the timeline here. We can see that our guy is still going through the university on his little roller skate things. So what we'd like to do here is actually remove the rig, and this is quite a common problem in VR shots where we want to get rid of either the tripod for a standalone thing, or we want to get rid of the cameraman, and it's often at the bottom of our rig right around the pole, which is quite a pain to remove. But using exactly the same workflow we just showed you for the insert tool, we can use the Mocha Pro Remove module to clean this up quite seamlessly. So let's take a look at that. So I'm going to take exactly the same approach as before. I'm going to come down to Mettle, Skybox Converter, and under here I'm going to choose my output as the cube map. And this time what I'm going to do is I want to center this guy in the middle of my shot. So I'm going to come down to my reorientated view. I'm going to adjust my camera to be about -90 degrees, so he's sitting right in the middle there. And the next thing I want to do is adjust the background underneath him to be about square. So I'm going to move this around to about here, and we'll tweak it just a little bit in this view as well. So now if I scrub through the timeline, so we've got a fairly good background running across there. You can see he's kind of going across the road right here. It's feeding from the top all the way down to the bottom. So we've got a semi-planar surface going on here. So what I want to do now is again take that into Mocha Pro and track this area so I can do a remove. So I'm going to pre-comp the layer again. So let's do Command-Shift-C. I'm going to move all that in there. I'm going to call this one Cube Map Remove, and I'm going to click OK. And then we'll come up to Effect, Mocha by Imagineer Systems, and Mocha Pro. And once again, we're just going to launch Mocha Pro immediately. And here, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to draw a little shape around his helmet here. So let's go all the way around like so. So this can be a little static layer. You don't need to track the top layer that you're removing. You just need to track the background behind him to do a remove. So I'm going to come in here and just make sure that's nice and smooth around him like so. And then I'm going to call this one Helmet. And let's just turn off the tracking for that because we don't want to track him. And then I'm going to draw a background around him. So I'm going to come down here and draw a little background all the way around on this road so we get all that texture information. And we'll turn on our surfacing grid. Now I'm only using this to actually see how my track is going. So the final thing I want to do is come down to perspective. Make sure we're tracking as many pixels as possible. So I'm going to set that to about 90. And I want to call this one background. So let's just call that BGD. And importantly, it has to go below the helmet because everything at the bottom is furthest from the camera, everything at the top is closest. So background has to go below the helmet in this instance. So the final thing I want to do is come down to link to track and switch it from background to none. And the reason I want to do this is I want to keep my shape stationary and just have the information feed through the shape so I can get the tracking data. So I've just zoomed out a bit so we can see this in action, and I'll turn my grid off. So we've got our surface here and we've checked link to track to none, and I'm going to start tracking forwards. So what you're going to see here is that the shape itself will remain stationary, but you can start to see the surface moving along with the road. And the reason it's doing this is because the link to track set to none is making sure that all the information is passing through the shape and updating the tracking data as it goes. And you can see how that surface is kind of locking on quite nicely to that area and making it work quite well. So this is not going to be entirely accurate here, but what it's going to do is make sure that this area fills correctly for in here, and we'll see that when we come to the remove. So I'm going to speed up now and we're going to see the track afterwards. Okay, so that's our track done now. And what we can do now is move over to the remove tool. I'm going to select my helmet, which is the area that I want to remove. Let's come over to the remove module. And we'll turn our surface off so we can see how this works. So under the remove tool, we've got a whole bunch of settings for setting the range of how it's going to remove and different illumination modeling. But what we want to see here is the actual result. So I'm going to click render for this one frame, and we'll see, because of the background's being tracked, that the helmet is going to remove correctly and have a nice clean surface. So if we come down to another area, say like this arrow area where the helmet is going over the arrow, and click render, you'll also see that the arrow replaces correctly because it's tracked that background road all the way through the shot and is using different frames to make sure that helmet is no longer appearing in the right spot. So I'm going to go ahead and now close that and click save. And back in the render interface, what we want to do is come down to module renders, and under render, I'm just going to click on render and choose remove. And that's going to do exactly the same thing inside the After Effects timeline. So we've got a little bit of an edge here. So what we can also do is actually duplicate our cube map. And on the lower one, I'm just going to delete the Mocha Pro effect. And under the cube map itself, we've got the option to actually apply the matte. So if I apply the matte on this layer, what that's going to do is cut the matte out down to the layer below. So if I solo this layer, you'll see that the remove area is actually cut out. So I'm going to choose my layers, choose just the helmet, and then that area is going to be matted. So I can go now back either into Mocha Pro or feather inside here. So if I go back into Mocha Pro, I can choose my layer and I can set some edge width. So here I'm going to bring out my edge width here a little bit, just like so. And if we look at the matte for that, you can see how that is being cut out. If we turn off our spline here, we can see that matted. So we can just bring that matte out a little bit like so. And if I close that and save, now the apply matte is going to blend in a lot nicer. And so when we go through the timeline, we'll actually see that removing correctly through the shot. Now, a remove obviously takes a little bit of time to render because it's got to analyze all those frames, but you can see it updates quite nicely and the helmet is gone. So now all we have to do is reverse that skybox like we did before and end up with the final result. So here we are with the final render, and we can see that that remove has worked incredibly well down here. If I turn off the final effect, we can see the original comp there with our rig. And then if we turn it back on, you can see how well it's removed down the bottom. So that again is just combining using the cube map from the Skybox converter to do a remove using the Mocha Pro plugin, and then reconverting back into the rectangular view using the Skybox converter again. So there's one final thing I want to do here, which is actually add a Skybox Viewer so we can see this result in 3D. So if I just go ahead and pre-comp this again, I'm going to call this View, and I'm going to come up to Effect, come back down to Metal, choose Skybox Viewer, and I'm going to create a new camera. And I'm going to use the 15mm preset here and click OK. So with that Skybox Viewer applied and our camera that we've created, we can now pan around the view using the C key, and we can see that that camera has been removed down the bottom there, and we can look around using the Mettle Skybox Viewer. So if I move to another area in the shot, it's going to take a little while to render because we're rendering directly from that Mocha Pro plugin to do the remove. We're going to move along a little bit, and then we can again look around and we can see that the helmet's been removed down there. And we can look around as normal. So as you can see here, combining the Mocha Pro plugin with your everyday After Effects workflow means less application management, more cross-integration with amazing third-party tools like the Mettle Skybox tools, and many effects editing tasks done faster. This has been Product Manager Martin Brennand for Imagineer Systems.